The Where Our Minds Wander podcast may contain sensitive content and explicit language. Listener discretion is advised. Greetings, fellow wanderers, to the places our minds wander.
The house at the end of the dirt road, where disembodied voices whisper and strange sounds make the living shiver.
Where shadows lurk at the edge of the woods, just outside your back door. And mysterious lights speed beyond reason across the clear night sky.
Odd events throughout time that lead you down the rabbit hole.
I'm Wes.
And I'm Beth.
And this is Where Our Minds Wander. Hello and welcome to Where Our Minds Wander, all you fellow wanderers. Thank you for joining us.
Hi, everybody.
Well, we have some exciting news to share with all of you. Beth and I have decided that we are going to be removing the paywall from our bonus episodes and turning them into regular episodes so they can be shared with all of you without having to pay for them.
And so our plan is over the next several months throughout the holidays, we will periodically release an episode that was previously behind a paywall, but now it's going to be a regular episode for everybody.
Yeah, we felt as though they're too good to be put behind a paywall. We want everyone to enjoy them. So you can all look forward to that over the next several months as we slowly release them.
And tonight's episode is one of those.
So, without any further ado, let's get into it. Beth, you want to start us off?
Of course. So, for tonight's episode, I thought it was a good time to circle back to something I came across when I was researching for our Lost Colony of Roanoke episode. I came across a couple articles that mentioned something called the Dare Stones. And after spending a good half hour reading about them, I thought they were really cool, but I didn't end up mentioning them in our previous episode because I felt like even though they were related, they were kind of a tangent.
And what's kind of funny is that at the time, I came across some other objects that were kind of similar. And when I told Beth about them, well, it made sense for us to put them all together. So tonight, we're going to be talking about the Dare Stones and the Toynbee Tiles.
And they're both pretty fascinating in my humble opinion.
They are, though.
They are.
These things are captivating.
So we're going to start off with the Dare Stones. For those of you who may have missed our Lost Colony of Roanoke episode, or if you've never heard of the Lost Colony of Roanoke, the nutshell version is that in 1587, Captain John White and 117 colonists sailed from England to what is now Hatteras Island off the coast of North Carolina. Along with White and his wife was their daughter Eleanor and her husband Ananias Dare. After struggling to establish their colony and being very low on supplies, John White sailed back to England. But due to extenuating circumstances, he wasn't able to return to the colony for 2 years. When he did make it back, he discovered that the entire Roanoke colony had vanished. It was as if they had all been going about their daily business, and then they had just disappeared into thin air. There was no sign of violence or struggle. There was no sign of fire or other natural disaster. There were no graves, and there were no bodies. Everyone had just simply disappeared, including Captain White's wife, daughter, son-in-law, and 2-year-old granddaughter Virginia, the first English child to be born in North America.
Now, the colony's disappearance became an enduring mystery, and on the 350th anniversary of Virginia Dare's birth, something pretty miraculous happened. Lewis Hammond arrived at Emory University in Atlanta, carrying a 21-pound engraved stone. He said that he found it while collecting hickory nuts with his wife along the Chowan River in North Carolina. Naturally, he was curious what the engraving said. 3 professors became immediately intrigued. Geology professor James Lester, physics professor J. Harris Perks, and history professor Haywood Jefferson Pierce Jr. To their shock, the engraving on one side clearly said, quote, Ananias Dare in Virginia went hence unto heaven, 1591, end quote. And the engraving also included the instructions that if anyone were ever to find the stone, they needed to present it to Eleanor's father, Captain John White.
But the reverse side of the stone contained an even more astonishing message. When the professors transcribed it, they were certain that they had solved the mystery of what had happened to the Roanoke Colony. Now, before I read it, remember the time, right? It was the late 1500s. So they referred to the indigenous people as savages. And I apologize for that, but I also feel like it's important to read it the way that it was written. It said, Father, soon after you left for England, we came hither. Only misery and war for 2 years. More than half of us died, 24 from sickness. The rest of us ran away when the savages became angry, murdering all but 7 of us, including my child. Ananias was murdered too. We buried everyone 4 miles east of this river on a small hill. We wrote all of their names on a rock. If you find this, we promise to give you great gifts. E.W.D. End quote. Now, I have to also say that that was my attempt at translating what the rock said because it was all written in Elizabethan English. So lots of hither and yons.
Yeah, exactly.
So the point is, the 3 professors were convinced that EWD could be no one other than Eleanor White Dare, and they now held the clue to the lost colony's fate. They'd died of sickness and then by native attacks.
Right, but first, the professors needed to determine if the stone was even authentic. And if it was, well, it mentioned that there were other stones with more information on them. Or at the very least, it indicated that there was a gravesite close to the Chowan River. Professor Pierce organized several trips to the region, but despite offering a $500 reward, no other stones were found. At least not yet. The Chowan River stone, as it came to be called, is made of quartz, which fit the geology of the area. And it was also written in near-perfect Elizabethan English. They also weren't able to recreate the engravings with modern tools, pointing to the fact that maybe they were made with 16th century ones instead. So, nothing conclusive, but Pierce was so convinced that the stone was engraved by Eleanor Dare that he bought it off Hammond for $1,000. Hammond, by the way, was never seen or heard from again.
So, kind of a red flag.
Just a bit. But Pierce thought perhaps other people might stumble across more stones. Now remember, he offered a $500 reward, and he didn't have to wait too long. In 1939, a stonemason named Bill Eberhart found not just 1, but 4 stones that he claimed were embedded in a hillside in South Carolina. He brought all 4 to Professor Pierce. The 4th stone was engraved with the year 1591 and 17 names, including Virginia and Ananias.
Professor Pierce bought the land where the Dare stones were found, and he spent much of the summer of 1939 excavating the area, searching for grave sites. I mean, he was totally invested. I should mention that his father, Haywood Jefferson Pierce Sr., who was also an educator, became heavily involved too. He was just as excited by the idea of solving the lost colony mystery. Unfortunately, they didn't find any graves or any additional stones, but other people did. In 1939, a man named I.A. Turner brought Pierce 2 newly found stones from the Chattahoochee River. 2 other men found more, a T.R. Jett and William Bruce. But it was Eberhart who proved to be a master at ferreting out additional stones. By late 1940, he had brought Professor Pierce 42 of them. Altogether, Professor Pierce purchased 47 stones, and each one added more details and clues to what had happened to the lost colony. The stones described how the survivors of the colony assimilated with the Cherokee, and Eleanor had married a chief and given birth to another daughter named Agnes. Some appeared to be actual grave markers, like the one that reads, quote, "Here layeth Nolan Ogle and wife, 1590, murdered by Savage." The stones were like scavenger hunt clues. Each one told of where the survivors were moving to next.
Pierce was housing all the Dare stones at Brenau University, which was actually owned by his father. They announced that on October 19th, 1940, they would host a scientific conference with 34 experts in attendance, from geologists to archaeologists, in order to truly authenticate the Dare stones. The consensus was that they couldn't disprove that the Dare stones were real. Elated, Professor Pierce submitted an article to the Saturday Evening Post in December of that year. Journalist Boyden Sparks took an interest in the stones, and he began investigating them for himself.
He left no stone unturned.
Really?
Come on. I mean, I kind of had to get a pun in somewhere.
Yeah, I would have had a hard time sitting here and not saying something myself. And he found out some disheartening information. First, Bill Eberhart, William Bruce, and I.A. Turner were all friends. Now, that in itself wasn't an incriminating discovery, but the fact that Eberhart was a known forger of both Native American and Mesoamerican artifacts, well, that was.
Yeah.
Sparks also mapped out where the 46 Eberhart Turner Bruce Dare stones were found, and the majority of them were within 4 miles of Eberhart's own home. Sparks published this in his findings in the Post on April 26, 1941. Just days after, Eberhart approached Professor Pierce's stepmother and handed her his latest find, a stone with the following message engraved on it: "Pierce and Dare historical hoaxes. We dare anything."
Nice. Then he had the audacity to try and blackmail the Pierce family, saying he'd confess it all as a fraud and ruin both Professor Pierce's careers and reputations unless they paid him $200.
What a piece of work.
Instead of paying the bribe, Pierce Jr. went to the press instead, exposing Eberhart. So, yeah, 47 of the 48 Dare stones were nothing more than a hoax. But what about the original stone found by Lewis Hammond?
Well, there have been countless experts over the years, including Professor Pierce, who have insisted that the first stone, the Chowan River stone, is the real deal. In 2016, Brenau University, where the Chowan River stone is permanently kept, collaborated with the University of North Carolina at Asheville to slice off a bit of the Chowan River rock. Inside was a bright white rock core. Experts argue that when the stone was carved, the letters would have appeared bright white, but the Chowan River stone's engravings were eroded, dirty, and appeared very old. They concluded that aging the engraving could be possible with chemicals, but they don't believe that Lewis Hammond would have had access to those type of chemicals, nor the know-how for how to achieve it. And the engraved words themselves are pretty consistent with the Elizabethan English in both spelling and grammar. The only inconsistencies is that the Chowan stone has VIA as an abbreviation for Virginia, and that abbreviation isn't used anywhere else in any written records from that time. Now, one other small inconsistency is in Eleanor White Dare's initials. Some experts point out that using 3 letters, like Eleanor allegedly did with her EWD, was uncommon. But those are very tiny details. So that begs the question, do these tiny details mean the Chowan stone isn't authentic? Is it too much of a coincidence that the Chowan stone was found the same year as the 350th anniversary of Virginia Dare's death?
I don't know, but it'd be pretty darn cool if it was authentic.
Well, yeah, of course it would.
Yeah, it'd be super cool. But just as an aside, Brenau University, which was once Brenau College, has been the home for all of the Dare stones and the Chowan stone since the 1930s. And I think it would be cool to see them, even if most of them are fakes.
Well, yeah, somebody took the time to make them, and they put some great effort into them, so I would like to see them.
Yeah. So when the Dare stones found a permanent home there, that's about the same time that students started talking about a resident campus ghost named Agnes. Now, some students like to spread the unproven story that Agnes was a jilted lover who took her own life. But if you remember, Agnes also just happens to be the name of Eleanor Dare's alleged second daughter, who is mentioned on one of the fake stones.
So these are definitely interesting artifacts, even if most of them are fake. And maybe this ghost of Agnes really is Eleanor's daughter, and she's attached to the Chowan River stone.
She could be, and that's why I found them so interesting. But then I also came across more modern plaques, for lack of a better word, that I thought were equally as interesting. These showed up in the 1980s, and they actually have nothing at all to do with Roanoke.
Yes, but then I also came across more modern plaques, for lack of a better word, that I thought were equally as interesting. These showed up in the 1980s and have nothing to do with Roanoke. So no one really noticed the anomaly in the Philadelphia pavement until just the right number of cars passed over it. Suddenly, bright blue paint shone through, revealing a few letters of the alphabet. Before long, due to the continuous street traffic, an entire license plate-sized tile was revealed, carved with an intriguing message. Toynbee idea in movie 2001. Resurrect dead on planet Jupiter. Now, I'm sure that this made quite a few people scratch their heads, especially when, over the next 40 years, hundreds of these colorful tiles began showing up embedded in American city streets, from Boston to Kansas City to Richmond. Most were just variations of the original message, but some were quite different, and frankly, quite angry.
Yes, but we'll get to those later.
But first, I want to focus on the original message. Toynbee idea in movie 2001, Resurrect Dead on Planet Jupiter. Throughout the 1980s, as more and more tiles popped up, with some specifically saying, Kubrick's movie 2001, people began asking the same questions. What do the strange messages mean? Who's making them? And what do Arthur C. Clarke, Ray Bradbury, Stanley Kubrick, and Arnold Toynbee have to do with it all? Now, if you don't know the work of Arthur C. Clarke, well, he was a prolific science fiction writer. He actually wrote about things that were invented eventually. Now, you heard that right. Invented eventually. He wrote the short story The Sentinel, which was published in 1951. In the story, there are astronauts traveling to Jupiter, and also on board is a supercomputer named HAL 9000. During the trip, HAL becomes more and more human-like, and one of the astronauts, Dave Bowman, decides that this really is not a good thing, and he should shut HAL down. HAL doesn't like this idea at all, and he ends up killing one of the astronauts and then tries to kill Bowman. However, Bowman manages to shut HAL down, and then when he lands on Jupiter, he discovers this massive monolith that he says is full of stars. In 1968, Stanley Kubrick released a film based on the Sentinel, called 2001, A Space Odyssey. So this is where the Jupiter and the movie 2001, part of Toynbee idea in movie 2001, Resurrect Dead on Planet Jupiter, comes from. But with that said, where did Toynbee come from?
Well, here's where it gets even more interesting. In 1984, Ray Bradbury,
who is also another science fiction writer,
wrote a short story called The Toynbee Convector that was published in Playboy. Maybe people really did read it for the articles.
Well, I have to say, I was really never into the smut magazines like a lot of my peers were, but Playboy did have a lot of good reading material in it.
I've heard this.
It's true.
Okay. Well, in this story, a time traveler named Craig Bennett Stiles is being interviewed by a reporter. Stiles says that in the future, there is a utopia. He convinces people that this utopia is possible because he's seen it for himself. And the people are so enamored with the idea that they start building it. Once this utopia is a reality, Stiles admits that he made it all up. He just wanted to see if a utopia was possible, and he thought the only way to get people to create one was to convince them that it had already been done. But like most authors, Bradbury didn't just pick a random name for his time machine. Toynbee was an actual person. Arnold Toynbee was also a writer, but he didn't write science fiction. He actually wrote about religion and history repeating itself. He was obsessed with the survival of civilization, though. He studied 26 different civilizations, actually, and determined that all 26 rose and collapsed due to nationalism, militarism, and tyranny. He also believed that the afterlife was not an automatic thing. He believed that it was man-made. Arnold Toynbee was pretty influential. Not only was Bradbury's time machine named after him, but Arthur C. Clarke also named a spaceship after him in his story Jupiter 5. Jupiter 5 is about intergalactic art theft and reptilians and moons that are actually spacecraft. So now we have the Toynbee part of Toynbee idea in movie 2001, Resurrect Dead on planet Jupiter.
But what about the rest? The Resurrect Dead on planet Jupiter part? It doesn't actually relate to Clark's story, Jupiter 5, although it'd be much easier to understand it if it did. Since the majority of the tiles, and definitely all the original ones, began in Philadelphia, some people think that it relates to a guy named James Morosco, a Philadelphia resident at the time. He was influenced by all of these things: Arthur C. Clarke's short stories, Kubrick's A Space Odyssey, and Arnold Toynbee's writings. And in the early 1980s, he formed a group called the Minority Association. Their goal was to bring dead bodies to Jupiter. He thought that the atmosphere of Jupiter could be manipulated in some way that would resurrect the dead, and then they would colonize the planet. So, let me say that once again. The resurrected dead would colonize the planet Jupiter.
Sounds plausible.
Why not? Right?
Sure.
Morosco tried to get media attention. He contacted newspapers and TV shows, but nobody took him seriously, of course. And to cinch the tie between the Toynbee Tiles and Morosco, there were new messages sprouting up on some of the tiles. Things like, "Murder every journalist, I beg of you."
Oh, I guess he was a little peeved they weren't paying attention to him.
Somebody was not a happy camper. Some even longer messages began appearing on tiles, blaming the mafia, the FBI, and NBC lawyers and journalists. Some of the tiles even claimed he had fled the country because he feared for his life, because people didn't like his idea of populating Jupiter with their dead loved ones. And the only way that he could get his message out was through his art.
If Morosco created the tiles, he definitely expressed his anger through his art. But regardless of who created them, somebody was expressing some serious anger through their art. One specific tile, called the Manifesto, is an absolute rant. In addition to being anti-Semitic, unfortunately, it says things like John Knight, who was the owner of the Philadelphia Inquirer, had the mafia in his back pocket, and he sent the mafia to murder the artist. He had to put blast doors in his house, and he claimed men were outside his house watching him. There's a lot more, but you can read it for yourself if you'd like. The link is in our show notes.
So the mystery of who was making the Toynbee tiles seemed to be solved at this time, except for this. In 2003, Doug Wergel, who worked for the Kansas City Star, contacted the only James Morosco in the Philadelphia area. James had passed away earlier that year at the age of 88, and his widow insisted that her late husband didn't know anything about it. That same year, Action News Philadelphia contacted the widow of another James Morosco. She did not recognize any of the tiles and said her husband had never expressed any particular interest in Jupiter. I know.
If somebody were to call me and ask me questions about you, and one of the questions was, does your husband ever show any particular interest in Jupiter? I'd be like, well, no.
I think I would just hang up the phone. So we still don't know who made the Toynbee tiles. And despite the messages going from cryptic science fiction references to flat-out paranoid rants, there were hundreds of them. They were simply made from painted linoleum tiles. The messages were etched or carved into them. Then they were painted in with a contrasting color. Then the whole tile was covered in tar paper and asphalt sealant. Since no one ever saw anyone placing the tiles on the ground, it's been speculated that they were actually dropped from a hole in the floorboard of a moving car. So picture this. You cut a hole in the floorboard of your car, and then while you're driving along, you just drop them down through the hole and they land on the asphalt.
It's ingenious.
It really is. It's so cool. Now, over time, the summer heat and passing vehicles basically melted the sealant and affixed the tile to the pavement permanently. As vehicles traveling down the road crossed over the tile, the tar paper was torn away eventually, revealing the lettering and painted surface. Toynbee tiles showed up in Philadelphia, Pittsburgh, Atlantic City, New York, Boston, Chicago, Cleveland, Washington, D.C., St. Louis, Cincinnati, Margate, and Kansas City.
A lot of freaking places.
Yeah, he put a lot of miles on his car. That's for sure.
And then the copycats started. Now, authentic Toynbee tiles, ones made by the one artist generally believed to be responsible, have been found ever since the 1980s in Philly. But the copycats are showing up even further afield. Noblesville, Indiana, Buffalo, New York, San Francisco, California, Portland, Oregon, and Roswell, New Mexico, Detroit, Michigan, Topeka, Kansas, Salt Lake City, Utah, and Tulsa, Oklahoma, to name a few. Newer tiles have been embedded on several major highways in Pennsylvania, including Interstate 476 in Delaware County and on Interstate 95. About 6 more were found on US 1 northbound, starting in Drexel Hill in Delaware County, Pennsylvania, in 2007 and 2008. The copycat plates tend to have italic script done in red, and the tiles are much larger than the originals. A popular new message seems to be, quote, House of Hades, one man versus American media in society 2017.
Now, understandably, many of these cities consider the Toynbee tiles to be graffiti and vandalism, not to mention offensive and threatening in some cases. And they've paved over them. It's not uncommon to go looking for a tile that you knew was there last week, and suddenly it no longer exists. There are also those people who feel that the tiles are art and showcase artistic expression and freedom of speech, and that they should be preserved or documented in some way. But so many have been lost over time that it might be too late for that. But with that said, there is a Toynbee tile interactive map that seems to be pretty up to date.
And it's kind of cool to look at, frankly. So I'll put the link to that in our show notes too.
Now, this interactive map catalogs where all the original tiles are that you can still see, as well as some of the copycat tiles. The site is very clear about where the authentic tiles are and which ones are not. The majority of these tiles are still in Philadelphia, although they also include original tiles that you can see for yourself in Pittsburgh, Cleveland, New York City, and Atlantic City.
Toynbee idea in movie 2001, Resurrect Dead on Planet Jupiter. Who knew that such a garbled message, presented in such a mundane way, would continue to intrigue people 40 years later?
Well, who knew that there was a group of people that wanted to colonize Jupiter with resurrected dead people?
Oh, that's true. But to be fair, it wasn't a very big group. It reportedly only had 4 members.
And they were all sitting in their mom's basement, eating pizza rolls, playing some space video game.
Yeah.
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 More than likely. Mom, we're out. Can you bring down more pizza rolls for the guys and I? We're working on trying to resurrect dead people and put them on Jupiter.
And how's Great Aunt Eunice doing?
Oh my God, could you imagine? But it doesn't surprise me. There's some pretty weird shit going down in people's basements or garages or man sheds. Who knows?
You never know.
I mean, this was pretty cool.
Yeah.
What an idea.
Yeah. Well, just cutting a hole, if that's how they were done, cutting a hole in your car and just dropping, driving slowly and dropping them down. And yeah, nobody's going to notice.
It seems like a fun thing to do. Hey, dear, let's go for a ride. You drop the tiles down through the floor while I slow down. We should start doing this around Plattsburgh.
What are we going to write on them?
Oh, God only knows. Well, there you have it. The Toynbee Tiles.
And the Dare Stones.
Yeah. And like we always say, go check our sources so you can delve into this more. You definitely want to go see these tiles and this interactive map.
Mm-hmm.
And perhaps you and your honey, when you're out on a ride or something to do on a Sunday, when they're like, whoa, we have nothing to do, and you live in one of these areas, get the interactive map and go for a ride with your sweetheart.
Oh, it'd be so much cooler than the Pokemon Go people.
Oh, my God.
Sorry if any of you are Pokemon Go people, but I just had a vision of people with their interactive Toynbee tile maps and they're looking for their Toynbee tiles. It's the same thing.
Hey, for all you single people out there, this might be a good first date.
Oh, why didn't we do that? That would have been an excellent first date.
Because we didn't know about this back then.
This is true. We didn't learn anything cool till we met each other.
Yeah, that's it. Yep. It's not what I usually do on a first date. But this would have been a great idea. All right. Join us again next week for an all-new episode of Where Our Minds Wander.
See you soon. Thank you for joining us. We look forward to traveling with you again to the places where our minds wander.
If you like what you heard, please take a moment and provide us with a 5-star rating and a comment on your favorite listening platform. It really helps us move up the list and become more visible on the podcast charts so new people can find us.
And thank you all for your continued support.
See you next week for an all-new episode.